What is Skynet and what is their role in this war of machines?
Is the Terminator the real villain? Or is it Kokoro?
Will Malcolm's kids be safe in the end?
And what is Kenta's future to saving the world?
Red and Red Real Reviews explores whether humanity is worth saving with the Netflix series Terminator Zero.
Ahoy, ladies! I didn't see you there. Would you guys like to set sail on this ocean of flavor?
Randall, look at eye contact. You're gonna be cool, right?
Oh, baby, I'm as cool as the other side of the pillow.
Been staring at this board for days.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Act. Bears eat beets.
My brain is on fire. I'm dying.
I am the one who knocks.
Bears. Beets. Battlestar Galactica.
When they say 2% milk, I don't know what the other 98% is.
It's hard to believe we're even the same species.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Oh my god. The microchip has been compromised.
Dracarys.
And welcome. This is our second season, people. Number 2. Well, maybe we don't want to say that, but
Like the 2 in my name. Oh, number 2.
yeah, not that kind of number 2, but Nutmeg
Wah,
2
wah.
Palmetto. Sure, that's fine. Yeah, so this is exciting. So we get to start off with something that we have never covered before. I don't know that we've ever covered an animated movie or TV series, right?
No.
And we are also covering like what would be considered an anime. So this is a double first for us.
Yeah, and to me, like I look at it and I see anime because I see the animation of the characters,
Mm.
but there's kind of a little bit of a mix of animation. There's kind of more of I don't want to say three-dimensional, but a little bit more depth and artistry to the backgrounds. So it's almost anime style, if not anime, just in case the internet trolls get on my case about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. Really the only anime I've watched is Sailor Moon. That's about it for me. So
Oh, traditional anime. I was almost gonna say no, Castlevania, but I guess Castlevania would be in vein with this more than
I
the
haven't
old
watched
school.
Castlevania either. I know my husband likes it, but I've
Oh, I
heard
thought
really
you
good.
did.
No, I've heard really good things about it. I don't know that you could consider Blood of Zeus anime, would you?
That's what I'm thinking. I'm sorry, Blood of Zeus. That's the one you watched. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking of as far as the one you watched. And that one I almost kind of maybe put more in the vein of this than, a Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, those sorts, the traditionals.
Yeah. However, I did notice the thing about this that made me wonder if it was a legitimate anime is that there was Japanese text instead
Yeah.
of, English.
Yeah.
Where the part at the end with the buttons, like it would have a banner in English of what the button said, it's like abort and I don't remember what the 3 buttons were, but it had a little banner above each button so you knew what they said because it was all Japanese characters. So
Yeah.
that that was how I knew it. I was like, okay, this is a real, I think, legit anime. So
Yeah.
uh as far as besides this being an anime, what did you know going into this, and how much have you seen or how much do you know about the Terminator universe?
I I will say I kind of went in with a very open mind, and normally, I think this is going to be an offshoot of the original films,
Mhm.
something like that. But I kind of went in with open mind, and I was very pleasantly surprised by the fact that it did kind of take its own path. Like it didn't like by the time it was over, I thought maybe it was flying a parallel universe to the original ones because they do reference Skynet quite a bit. They do reference the Americans a few times. So part of me by the end is almost wondering maybe if this is like a parallel universe to the films, but at the same time, I'm also thinking I also still kind of have it in my head that they're just taking very core details and telling their own story of Terminator. It's because they didn't obviously they didn't once mention Sarah Connor, John Connor,
Right.
that sort of thing. So but I guess right now I'm kind of 50-50 whether it's an offshoot or its own thing with a few select core details, but one way or the other, I'm pleased with the, kind of how it told its own version of the Terminator story versus just doing yet another Sarah Connor Chronicle, something like that.
Yeah, I was kind of it I was kind of happy to see that it didn't really tie into like the Schwarzenegger movies because I mean, obviously I've seen the first two. I think I remember the second one more, T2. That was the one with the kid in it, right? So I think
Yeah,
that was the one
that
I
was.
remember the most, but I mean, that was years ago that I saw it. I don't think I ever ended up seeing the third one, which came out maybe in like 2002 or 2003.
Oh, T3 did come out way after Judgment Day. Yeah,
It
that's right.
did.
I forgot all about T3.
Yeah, and I think from what I heard, I never saw it, but that was when I worked at the video store. I think that Arnold may have had a cameo in that one somehow.
I think so, and that was probably his last one.
I think it
That
was his
was
last
probably his
one.
last
Yeah, and then there was the Salvation in 2009 or 2010, which I did see, but I don't remember it much. I just remember some of the actors that were in it. It was like Bryce Dallas Howard, Christian Bale. There was actually a few good names in that one, but you never really I mean, it wasn't really heavily publicized. You didn't really hear tons about it. So so yeah, I mean, I didn't of course I remember like Sarah Connor. I remember the name, like I remember certain things from the Schwarzenegger movies, but that being said, I really don't remember much about the story. So I was like, oh, I hope they're not going to test me with my knowledge because
one.
I'm like that
No,
stuff is 25 years in the bank probably. So
30. I
oh
think
yeah.
I think Judgment Day came out in '92, so I think it's over 30. I could be
Oh
wrong. Don't quote me on the year, but I think for some reason I'm thinking Judgment Day was '92.
yeah, you know what? You're right, but it's like why do the mid 90s seem like they were 20 years ago? Like it's a lot more than 20 years ago. So
Yeah, we think 30 years ago. We still think people are talking about the '70s.
yeah, yeah. My frame of mind for time in the past handful of years is just whack. It's whacked.
Handful, I'd say 20. I'd
Yeah.
say 25 since high school.
Yeah. So there was a couple big name voices in the movie. There was Rosario Dawson, which she's from a lot of things, but one thing I think of her from being from is Daredevil. She was like the nurse in the show.
I always think of there was a movie with The Rock that she was in. Was it Walking Tall? I think it was Walking Tall.
I think you're right. I think she might have been in that. Yeah, so she was advertised as being one of the main voices because she was one of the biggest names. So I was always kind of listening, being like, which one is she? You know, is she Masaki? Like I couldn't tell quite who she was, and then
Hmm.
I figured out that she was Kokoro. So that was interesting because I mean I didn't feel like it sounded like her. I felt like she wasn't really putting on a voice, but for some reason I it took me until probably the last third of the series to figure out it was her.
I always have a hard time picking out voices like that. Like even something like Madagascar, where it was like big name, big name, big name, big name, big name, big name, and I'm watching even just the trailer. I'm watching the trailer, like I don't recognize a single one of those voices.
I
So
yeah.
I didn't pick out Rosario Dawson at all, and I don't know whether just the way they played the end credits, where Netflix cuts it off quick sometimes and it never got to it, or I wasn't paying attention before it recycled to the next episode. I just never caught her name. So when I saw your notes, I was like, really?
Yeah, so she was the biggest name I would probably say. Also, the older lady, I don't know if they call her the prophet or what they called her character's name, but that was played by, and I'm forgetting the actress's name, but one of the main characters in Handmaid's Tale.
Not Elizabeth Moss.
No, the I can't think of her name, like the lady that oversees the handmaids. She's kind
Oh,
of a
okay.
villain.
Okay.
I can't
Yeah.
think of what her name is. So she played the prophet's voice. And then there's an actor named Timothy Oliphant. I don't know if I'm Oliphant.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The
Um, eh,
Hitman. The Hitman.
well, that's what he's from.
Yeah. He's the that was the first film I remember him in, was The Hitman.
The Hitman. Which one
Yeah.
is that?
It was based off a video game. The
Oh,
Hitman was a,
okay.
a video game
Okay.
originally, and then they made a movie adaptation.
I know he's one of those guys. You see him, he has a very distinct face. You're
Mhm.
like, I know I've seen him in a million things before. It's just you can't really, you know, place where you've seen him. But he played the voice of the Terminator, who didn't really have a lot of lines. So
Oh,
that's why
yeah.
he didn't. That's
That's
why
hard to pick up.
he didn't start speaking until the last episode or last two episodes or something like that. I think it was last episode actually. So
Yeah, not in great depth of dialogue. I think before that it was probably like the I am Groot Vin Diesel lines.
yeah. Yeah, so we didn't get a lot of voice work from him. So yeah, speaking of, all these characters we're talking about that were voiced by all these famous actors. Did you have a favorite character overall as you were watching it?
100% I Aiko. One that's one badass chick. I mean, one she's got a very gruff exterior.
Yeah.
F that. Two, she's very determined as far as, and in a kind of evolving sense, because she goes back in time, and at first she's just gonna go after Malcolm and take him down, and then as it evolves, she realized, okay, maybe Malcolm's not this bad guy, and I'm getting a little more attached to these kids. So she kind of evolves into being more of I don't want to say open-minded, but perceptive to how things are kind of changing as they're going through the story, and realizing like, okay, who actually is the villain here? Who do I need to focus my attention to? And then of course the Terminator's on a berserker rampage. So
Yeah. Yeah, she was good to root for because she was, a badass and she's very tough and she was kind of looking out for herself. But I think, and we were just kind of thrown into it too. The first scene is like her having this like battle, like running from the Terminator. So we were
yeah,
just kind of thrown into, we're like, who is this girl? What is she doing? And we were rooting for her from the beginning, but as she, is trying to find Malcolm and she's trying to somewhat protect the kids, she is being very, stoic and very standoffish, doesn't really want anything to do with them. It's just like, listen, don't do this and don't do that. Like, I know what I'm doing, and step off and just back off, and I'll deal with this. And, very protecting her feelings and trying to be very um indifferent to the situation.
yeah, stoic's a good word, because she did very much do a 180 from that type of character to a more protector bodyguard type of role.
Yeah,
Like a
definitely like a
like a
like a
good soldier
bodyguard.
should, I guess.
Yeah. And then I mean, it was nice that we had kind of like a handful of core players. It wasn't too character heavy, so you really kind of got to know the characters. So let's, go through Malcolm's family, and then we'll go with we'll talk about Malcolm after. But I as far as the kids go, I would say that Kenta kind of had that same stoicness that Aiko had. And he's always kind of looking at the technology angle, like, oh, let me take those pieces, I want to do this, like, I want to work on that, or I want to make this into that. And he was the one that was having difficulty with Masaki being a robot. So he was saying that she was programmed to feel that way, that she didn't really have any feelings, she's just a machine. And so she was the he was the one that was really skeptical of that and didn't trust her, was not trusting her in that situation. And then little hero, the little brother, he was cute. I liked the part where he was trying to beat down Kenta
Yeah.
because he wanted to protect Misaki, and he felt that Kenta not believing that she was trustworthy was a threat. So he was like, well, if you don't trust her, I'm going to beat you up. Like, you're going to have to go through me.
Yeah. And I, of the three of them, and we'll get into it more in the next topic, but Rika, she had kind of the, if any of the three of them kind of resonated with me, I guess it was probably Rika. She had the kind of a defiant attitude at different points. Like at
Yes.
one point, it's with the little robot kitty cat. And then at another point when they split off, and I think she's with Aiko, and the boys are um off with Masaki. So she's kind of got this rebellious streak in her. Hero, I hate to say it, but he kind of came off as a softie to me.
Well, yeah, yeah. But I don't,
Super over emotional.
he's, well, I don't want to say he's the typical like youngest child, but kind of is like, but I don't think that him being a softie made him like annoying, or like I thought it was kind of cute when he was like crying. I was like, oh, I was like, I just wondered, I'm like, how young is this voiceover actor, or is
Yeah.
this a 30-year-old guy crying in this? I don't even know how old all the kids were, but you
Hey, it
wonder
could
whether,
be. We know Bart Simpson was voiced by a woman, so like it could be
right.
some mismatched voice actor.
Yeah, so I found myself, whenever he was crying or he was like, hey, I found myself visualizing. I'm like, okay, is this a 40-year-old man in the vocal booth, or is it a cute little child? Not sure.
We don't know. And to your point on Kenta, Kenta's another one, I guess kind of like Aiko, but not really in the same vein where he is like his intelligence gives him a bit of prominence. And maybe it's just because we know there's Skynet, there's the Terminator. We know there's a technological background to this. So we kind of immediately see Kenta, plus as the oldest child, we kind of immediately see him as having some prominence in the story.
Mm,
And then by the end of it, he really appears broken. But when uh when Malcolm shuts him out, and then his conversation with the
yeah.
Terminator about his future, like so we really see someone that has this purity of just using his intelligence for his enjoyment to the point where he's just a broken soul going onward, and we don't really know what's to come, what's to come of him.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about where we think that would go, with the future of this show going forward potentially. So yeah, we have the three kids. Yeah, and then let's talk about Misaki. So, I mean, in the first episode, she's kind of introduced as like the nanny pretty much.
Yeah.
She's at the store and she buys this robot kitty and brings it home. Malcolm is like, no, you're getting that
Furious.
thing out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's furious. And then so then you make that connection like, oh, that's the lady that was at the store that was dealing with the what do you call that kind of robot?
The Enos, those like kind
Eno.
of drone robots.
Yeah, like the Eno was like malfunctioning and basically not doing its job. And the guy in the store was like, oh, I'm sorry you're dealing with that. And so like, so we see this lady bring the robot kitty home and she says, oh, I got this for the kids. And you're kind of assuming like, oh, this is that guy's wife. And then you kind of come to find out that she's the nanny. The mother is deceased somehow. We don't really know how. And so that kind of sets up her role in the family. It seems like she's somewhat of a live-in nanny, perhaps. So very close with the family. And then as it goes on, we just kind of see this arc of her not really knowing where she came from and why doesn't she remember anything, and then the police are questioning her and are like, hey, why do you have no records, you don't pay taxes, so
It always
the
comes back to the money.
yeah, so there's no record of you basically. So then there's, that big reveal of her arm getting ripped off, and we discover that she's actually a robot.
Yeah, I thought her arc was interesting because it's like always back and forth. Like she's got these moments where we see her as an independent body and she's kind of taking a leadership role with the boys. Because obviously she's with the boys most of the show, right? Because kind of off on her own. Um, but then there's other things where we see her and she's just an automaton. Like she's like, and especially as we learn what Malcolm's goal was to her, with her to give her this kind of free will programming. And there's times where she doesn't know what to do with that. She's kind of sitting there lost, and there's kind of no clear purpose for her to follow with the kids, to find Malcolm, to stop Skynet, Terminator, whatever the case may be. And she doesn't really have a clear role, so she sits there, and it's like her programming doesn't know what to do. Like she doesn't know what conclusion to jump to where from where they are.
Right, she's almost a little bit like submissive, like you kind of feel like the kids don't really listen to her.
No, yeah,
Like they don't really see her as a leader, like they don't see her as being very authoritative. But then, she does kind of come off being somewhat meek, and then
mhm.
towards the end she kind of discovers, who she really is, and she starts like fighting and stuff, and you realize that she's kind of been programmed, or she's been trained to do these things, and she kind of like forgot about it and had to like reharness it.
Yeah, and it's funny. You said like that they don't respect her authority, and we almost see that very immediately when they sneak out of the house on her.
Exactly, yeah, when she's in the bathroom she's like, I'm just gonna deal with this, and they're like, bye.
Yeah, later.
Yeah, and then last but not least there's Malcolm. So uh, I mean, I don't know how you felt about it, but I kind of felt like I rotated between like somewhat liking him and then somewhat like not really liking him. Like I was
Oh
kind
yeah,
of conflicted with him, but I think that was how it was supposed to be, right?
I think so too, and a lot of that's because you're set up to think even if he had good intention, he does a bad thing by unleashing Skynet. And then, of course, you start to question whether, okay, Skynet is a Kokoro. Who's the bad? Who's the bad entity here? And like, then he goes back and forth, and you see him kind of more side towards Kokoro being a villain, or maybe I should use the word antagonist, uh,
Mm.
more towards that. And then he is torn between shutting her down and using her to save humanity or what have you. So you do see him kind of bouncing back and forth between good guy, bad guy. Like what's his real goal here?
Yeah, and I think as a viewer you're questioning what his role is, because we're kind of taught to believe from the get-go that he's sort of the bad one. First it shows his family and his kids are like, "Oh, you're never around, Dad. You're just busy at work all the
Yeah,
time. You just go to work and we never see you, and you said you were going to do this for the anniversary of Mom's passing or Mom's birthday or whatever, and you're not staying true to those things." And so you see that, and then you hear from another character, Aiko, "Oh, I'm looking for this Malcolm character. He's a bad guy." Like,
yeah,
so
I gotta
it's
stop
just
him.
right. So it's just kind of put in your brain from the get-go, like this is a bad guy. Like he's shitty to his family, and he's just a shitty guy who's all into technology and his own gain, and all of that. So yeah, I think he does have an arc of, okay, you like him, you don't like him, you like him. By the time it got to the end, I think I liked him generally. I thought
I
that he was a good dude, but
I think I had pity for him by the end.
oh yeah, definitely.
Like, yeah, because he almost gets to the point where he could not make a decision. He couldn't see this through. And he, tells Kogoro, like, trust Kenta's intuition. And I'm not totally sure whether whether Kenta made the right decision, but that's besides the point. But like, he like you almost feel like there's a bit of regret with him as his character sunsets, for lack of a better word.
Oh yeah, definitely. So we'll talk a little bit more about the big reveal moments of which
I,
Malcolm has a lot
I
in.
I do have a hot take though. By the
Yeah.
end of the show, I did really like the Terminator. I mean, we go through this whole season with him being just this berserker, traditional
Yeah.
Terminator. Arnold comes back in time. He's trying to kill Sarah Connor, and then Judgment Day comes, where the Terminator is this, the T-1000, which is just a pure berserker, and they crafted the imagery of this Terminator to be like T-1000, at least by the end of it, and or T-2000. I think it was T-1000. They did kind of make the artistry look like that role. I can't think of the actor's name that played him. He was the villain in Reacher. But
Right.
the flow of that, by the end of it, you kind of get this. Well, I don't want to give away the reveal before we talk to it, but he, tells Kokoro, excuse me, Kenta something, and you're kind of like, wait a minute, is the Terminator a good guy?
I think once he starts talking, you're a little bit like, okay, A, why is he talking all of a sudden?
Mhm.
B, like, is there more to it than we think? So yeah,
Right.
I think by the end of it, I mean, you are sort of on the fence, but you're more towards being okay with the Terminator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's true. I would say I also went through that progression. Speaking of progression, so this series obviously had the element of time travel, and we've actually covered in our first season, we covered a few shows that had to deal with time travel. So like Outer Range, Bodies, Three Body Problem. When did Three Body Problem? No.
No, that they were just hopping around. They were just hopping around the
So
story. I don't think they actually
Bodies,
time
and
traveled.
then Time Bandits. I mean, those are three ones I could think of. There might have been one or two more. But because
You
there
miss
was
anti-sci-fi. You miss anti-sci-fi now on your fourth show with time travel.
um but like because there was time travel involved, were there some things that you kind of had trouble placing in your brain, or things that kind of be made things complicated because you're having trouble wrapping your mind around, okay, if that is true, then this means that.
I feel like there's not a there's not a lot that I'm left open-ended with the WTF in my brain. Like there's things that like, okay, I can kind of see where this might be going, and it's enough of a tease where I'm more looking forward to a future season as opposed to being left with questions unanswered. One thing though that I because I constantly was wondering who Aiko was. Like at one point, I'm thinking she's an older version of Rika. I know their complexion is way different. But or maybe Descendant, because obviously it's years in the future. So like, okay, maybe like Rika grow. Although I know it's only about 25 years, but maybe Rika grows up, has a child, and it's Aiko, something like that. Like maybe there's some familial connection. And then by the end of it, when we find out Malcolm's familial connection to Aiko, and you're like, wait a minute, is there some kind of sick incestual uh tone to this? Tone to Aiko's identity? Like what like who is she in this family chain? How many
Yeah.
different pieces, how many different characters could she be? Like is she's somebody parent or is she somebody child at the same time? Like what is going on here? Maybe that's why she's so screwed up.
Yeah, I think even thinking of Bodies in particular, there was that character that was his own I don't even know how to put the relation, but not like his own grandfather. I like I can't even articulate it. I don't remember. There was some like mind-blowing thing. Because and that was I think what gave me trouble wrapping my mind around is the fact that even the old lady mentioned when you're going back in time, you're traveling to a different time in the past. So she was trying to say, like, this is you're going to the past, but like it's like a different timeline. So she called it swapping out one reality for another.
Yeah.
And then she literally says it's an unprecise science. So that kind of made me think, okay, well, is that a foreshadowing? Like, is because Aiko is going back in time, does that mean that it's going to cause problems? Like, how different shows always talk about, the thing about time travel is that there is a potential for there to be an issue because you might change something along the way, and then all of a sudden something else changes because of that, and then it just keeps snowballing almost to where it's like an alternative universe or alternative timeline where something wouldn't have happened otherwise. So like
And that's
is that does that have potential for happening?
I think it does, and that was how I interpreted us watching a butterfly effect in real time. And then when the elder tells Aiko about all these different realities, I do think you're onto something as far as these realities are all just instances because someone went back in time, did something different, and now there's a new reality where it didn't exist before. Uh, and I think I think that was also witnessed a lot with Malcolm's change of heart to Kokoro. Is she an asset? Is she a danger? That sort of thing. With Kenta's role with the Terminator, him, you know, being that, okay, maybe he sent the robot back in time, an older version of him sent the robot back in time. So, like, and it was interesting because, like you said, a lot of pieces in the past always reference a butterfly effect, but they always reference it as something that is a single point. Like, you did this differently, that created this, and then
Right.
history had corrected itself or adjusted itself. This one, it almost feels like, and we kind of get to see those other works, shows, movies. We kind of get to see those still from the third party perspective. This one, we're almost kind of seeing it from the first party perspective because we're seeing it how, because of this, the interaction between the characters change and then it sets up the new present. So it's almost like we're not really watching it from a distance, we're watching it in the here and now, which I thought was an interesting way of utilizing the butterfly effect as a storytelling method.
Yeah, what was interesting to me too about like the way that this show did time travel is that it wasn't really the actual time travel was not a big thing at all, which was weird because it was just like, okay, we're going back to this time. Bam. Like it wasn't like, okay, we got to get in the machine and we got to set it to this and we got
Yeah.
to like it wasn't so much about like how we're getting there. It was just like bam, we're there all of a sudden. Like don't ask any questions about the process, like time travel is a thing and it's just we're doing it. So like didn't you find that weird?
Yeah, almost like the machine knew where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
Like they hopped in and it's like, well, the only one, and I guess the only one that kind of disproved that a little bit was when Malcolm and Misaki go back in time for the first time. Because that one could have been random. I don't necessarily think they picked out a random, 1992 or 1994 or whatever it was. I don't think they necessarily picked out that random time to go back to. But all the other ones, like, it was kind of assumed that Aiko wanted to go back to this before Malcolm released Kokoro, and Malcolm jumping back and forth after the initial time period, a time jump that kind of where he's more referring to them in theory, not so much seeing them in practice, but those kind of felt a little bit more planned in his head. Like I want to go back to this particular time period.
Yeah, and like something I was wondering too is there was a couple scenes where the person or people traveling back in time landed in the past time naked, right? And there was like one
Oh,
scene where like people that were walking by in the alley or something were like, "What the?" Because there's naked people walking by, but
like bodies.
they didn't really acknowledge it more than that. But like usually if a series or a movie has time travel, it's like that person is wearing whatever they wore in that future or past time, and you're like looking at them like, oh man, like you're wearing weird clothes for like this time period. But like it was weird the fact that they like were naked when they transferred over.
True, but remember in bodies that was
They
done.
were.
Yeah. Because remember when I can't remember the young girl's name, the young detective, when she went back, she was naked, and when not Tobias, Elias, when he goes back as the old man, he's naked. So like we actually and I think there was some show way back when that touched on that as well. I don't remember whether it was a cartoon or a live action show, but or maybe it was a movie. There was something I remember from way back when that touched on time travel from that. Like your clothes can't materialize through space. It's just sent to your
Oh,
physical being, your molecular buildup.
okay. Yeah, I was wondering if there was some sort of explanation for it because I've, seen it done both ways in media, but usually it's done with people wearing clothes that they're wearing that they take to the different times. So
Back to
I
the Future.
I just thought that was interesting that like they didn't really like acknowledge it or spend too much time acknowledging things like that, especially the time travel or like I don't want to say nuances of the time travel, but like the thing with being naked, like you can't take clothes with you apparently.
Just thought, ooh, naked, awkward.
Yeah. Um so I felt like, much like there was the element of time travel, which we've covered before, there were some parallels too between this show and the movie Atlas that we covered in season one. So both kind of explored the pros and cons of trusting AI. So when Malcolm first created Masaki, she was a very bare bones model and he was kind of training her. It kind of reminded me of Atlas interacting with her AI friend. So,
Here's your
and then
coffee.
yeah, exactly. That whole when he was like sitting in the chair across from her and I was like, this is just like that scene where they're like J-Lo and the robot are like getting to know each other. So there was that. And then there was also the tie-in with, can robots have real feelings or are they programmed to feel a certain way? Are they programmed to be a certain way or do they just become that way? Like, do they have an actual identity basically? So, being that there were those parallels, did you see any other kind of parallels between the two?
Um, I actually didn't. My brain kind of didn't go down that note. I just kind of see AI, and I'm like, oh God, here we go, another AI storyline. Um, so, uh, but to that point, I can see from that perspective, I can definitely lend agreement to the learning aspect of the AI to the primary character. As far as learning personalities and learning to human, so to
Mm.
speak. Um, the one thing, like, I'm also no less convinced, even though Hollywood may walk back into it, because why would Hollywood have independent thought nowadays? So even if they're walking backwards into it, I'm still no less convinced of some subtle subplot to warn the audience about the dangers of AI, because
Mm.
we see how Kokoro is learning. We see how Coco now, obviously in Atlas, the robot learns the humans as an eventual benefit in defeating. Can't think of the villain's name.
I can't
Um,
either.
but we see the learned behavior in that context used as a benefit to humanity. Um, even though one person versus a group of people
Hmm.
in this situation, but in this one we almost see it the way the fears of AI exist, where Kokoro and Skynet kind of uh, indirectly referred to, but Kokoro in front of us, they're kind of seen as it's learning humanity to be a detriment to humanity or a threat to humanity. Like,
Right.
okay, I'm picking out information because this race seems flawed. This species, maybe I should use the term species instead of race. This species seems flawed.
Hmm.
I need to destroy it. So we're almost kind of seeing the effect of AI used in more of that negative context, a tool of war. And we could have a situation like Skynet, Kokoro. Are they adversaries, or are they both two flavors of evil?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that we're kind of wondering where they're going with this. And, as Kokoro is like, oh, I'm learning this information, or I know I have all this data for this, you're just like, you're kind of taught to be like, oh, geez, that sounds dangerous, and
Yes.
it's one of those things. So yeah, I could see with um the relation to like this big, neon warning about AI and the human race, when you're talking about race, human race. And then another thing that I thought of in relation to Atlas was in Atlas, I believe it was Atlas's mother who created the AI, correct?
Yeah.
So in this, it was the father figure who created the AI. And in Atlas, I think the artificial intelligence, I can't remember his name, was really more of like a sibling for Atlas, right? Like, didn't she kind of say that she was like raised with him and like he took the attention?
Oh, like a playmate.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it was more of an equal, more of like a sibling. And in this circumstance, the father created the AI to be like a nanny for his kids. Well, he initially created the technology and then he kind of repurposed it into a nanny for his kids.
Yeah. And then to that point, he goes and makes Kokoro with a completely different directive in mind. So like his objective when he was working on Masaki is completely different from years later
Right.
in the creation sense.
And totally unrelated. I don't know if you had this thought for a minute or if I'm just wacky, but the whole part where Malcolm was creating Misaki and he created her into this whole thing. And then he was talking about like, oh, and then we decided to go back in time and I didn't plan on falling in love. I thought for a second, I'm like, wait, I'm like,
Did he procreate with a robot?
yeah, that was actually my first thought. And then he said something about like I didn't intend to fall in love, but then I think he made a reference to the kids or something. So then I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, did he have the kids with Misaki and is she the kid's mother? But that's weird that she died. So
Yeah.
like I was just kind of confused a little bit. I was trying to think if there was more of a link that like maybe Masaki was the kid's mother and that she did die, but that he like revived her and brought her back because there was that situation where he used her CPU or something to make Kokoro. And like that whole scene was a little bit confusing to me too, because when she just like opened her head and he took out that thing and he's like, oh, thank you for that. Like, you know, and then I was like, it seemed like that was at that point that he kind of like, I don't want to say reset, but didn't he kind of reset her and made her the nanny? Was like, you are going to be the nanny now.
Yeah.
You work for me.
Yeah, and Misaki stopped being a kind of friend or intimate partner or whatever, and became more of a subordinate, I guess.
Yes, like,
Subjugate.
am I wrong in that the point before he reset her, like you almost got the sense that like there was like he had love for Misaki or loved
No,
Misaki,
you're
like
not. Yeah, you're not off base with that. I kind of wondered the same thing. I don't know if I went so far at the moment in thinking that the children were the children of a human and a cyborg, but
I was like, that can't be. That just can't
yeah,
be.
it's
Like,
especially because he had such a vivid reliving of their mother's death when he told Kokoro, like he thought there was some profound meaning of she died for this particular reason, so I can go do X, Y, and Z. But then I realized to myself there was no deep meaning behind it. It was just a freak accident,
right.
bus, bus crash, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and then there was that reference to that later. So I was like, okay, so she is not their robot mother. And I was like, physically, I don't think that's possible.
No,
Um,
unless the
so
cyborg really's got some inner reproductive workings. I don't
yeah,
know. Maybe, who
yeah.
knows?
I have no idea. Speaking of WTF things, so there was a few times watching the show where there were like big reveals or kind of shocking things where I was like, I had my mouth open a little bit. The first one being when Misaki was revealed as a robot. When the Terminator pulled her arm off and it had all the wires, you're just like, oh, she's a robot.
Yeah, yeah, and not just that, but also as you learn how long they go back, or I guess forward because it was future and then they went back, but like how long the two of them had been linked, and you're kind of, well, I guess this is kind of related to our earlier discussion, like why he entrusted her as the nanny. Well, of course, I mean he's been grooming this robot for, you know, different spans of 30, 40, 50 years maybe. So of course they have a close connection. So there were a lot of jaw drop moments with Masaki, I feel like.
Yeah, that was the first one I think that came up. And then when Kokoro was having this conversation with Malcolm and she said, you know, I've gone through, there's no records of you. You must be from the future. So at the moment where he literally was like, all right, let me tell you a story. And he tells this whole elaborate story about his life and he was born in 2025 and you're just kind of
Yeah.
sitting there and all the
Wait a
pieces are
minute.
coming together in your head. So that was like that whole story time moment was a big reveal in itself, I thought.
Yeah, and especially with that whole jump forward, jump back thing. You know, like
Yeah.
like here's Malcolm in this time, but he went forward in order to start this whole Masaki arc, and then he went way back to kind of try and correct life or just live life, with his robot bride or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and then for me there was at the end Malcolm telling Kenta he's not going to open the door. You're just like, okay, like what? Like you're just going to let your son die? Like are you insane? Like then you're just like, okay, you are a shitty person. Like you're just
Yeah.
like how could he sit there and be like, sorry, can't open the door, like no, sorry, I'm not going to
And
save you.
And to my earlier point, I think that's where we start to get this kind of broken psyche from Kenta. Like
Yeah.
that's where he starts to become a broken character because of that. Uh and I think that that also leads to another jaw drop moment with the Terminator, as far as him telling Kenta that you sent me back to abort this destruct, like or not to abort, to self destruct me. Like I can't self destruct myself. You gave me instructions to come back and tell you to do this. So
Yeah, well,
like those two things are kind of tied together, where you have Malcolm to Kenta to the Terminator telling him that like you sent me back. It's like, well, so maybe Kenta's this John Connor type of character. Maybe Aiko is not the John Connor, Sarah Connor character. Maybe it's Kenta. He's in the future. He's the resistance leader. And he's, instead of going back himself, he's telling them to send in the Terminator back to kind of correct things because of this, I don't want to say tinderbox, but this, um, matchbox ignition moment between Malcolm and Kenta where he shuts him out.
yeah, that's that that's like sign language for more. That reminds me of.
More Terminator Zero, please. More Terminator Zero.
You know how you see like little kids, like they can't really speak, but you tell them to use sign language. So you have like a 1-year-old that's going. It's like kind of creepy because they don't say anything.
More anime, more anime, more anime.
Like they want more food and they're like,
Yeah.
it just reminded me of that. But yeah, that was definitely a big reveal on my list, was the Terminator saying, "Oh yeah, I'm told that I can't self-terminate." And then Kenta's like, "Okay."
Mhm.
And the Terminator is like, "You told me that," or "By you." And then Kenta's like, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Boom.
yeah,
And
that
another
that was
one,
crazy.
and another one to me we touched on a little before was Aiko's heritage, her lineage rather.
Yes. That was
Like
like,
she's Malcolm's mother. What? Yeah, I'm over here thinking she's one of the kids or she's one of the kids' kids. Like some like I know that the years don't necessarily add up in math, right? But like I'm almost kind of thinking she's just an offspring of this family, but it turns out that she's the front of the offspring, and
yeah,
like so. Wait,
because
where's Malcolm originally from? Is he originally from 2040 or even longer? You know?
yeah, because it shows him being born in 2025 and they're originally in 2022, correct? So that means 3 years from now. And I remember, in the part where she's kind of, Aiko is kind of next to Malcolm as he's like dying, basically, right? And that's when he kind of tells everything. And he says something about like, you have to protect your grandchildren. And
Mhm.
but she's like, but I don't have any kids. Like I'm not a mother. And she's just like in disbelief. And like, so you're thinking that in 3 years from the beginning timeline, she's going to have Malcolm in
Talk about a
2025.
butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Talk about-
Yeah. And then you're telling this, by the way, to a stoic, tough badass. And she's like, "Me, a mother? Are you
yeah,
fucking kidding me?"
yeah.
Like,
Hardly the nurturing character.
right. Yeah. So that's why she found it so hard to believe, even though this guy is literally telling her, like, "Hi, I'm your son, by the way. I'm about to die, but I need to
Mhm.
tell you this." Like, it was just so like I was literally like, and as I'm putting it together, the wheels are turning in my head, and I'm like,
Yeah.
any other WTF moments we missed?
No, just to me, a lot of it's origin stories. It's it kind of starts to explain things. Misaki at the police station, but that kind of gets clarified, and then we have all these other ones like Malcolm's origin story,
Yeah.
Rika, or not Rika, I'm sorry, Aiko, and then of course the Terminator with Kenta. Like where did this loop start now? We can't figure out this Malcolm Aiko loop, and now we gotta figure out this Kenta Terminator loop too.
Yeah. So speaking of the Kenta Terminator loop, so I mean, overall, did you like the show? And it hasn't been picked up yet. So officially as of now, but I mean, it has been very
Better.
popular. So I'm assuming it will be picked up. So do you think the story lends itself to another season, and what would that look like if they did get picked up?
It absolutely does. Just because you've got so many open endeds with, like, I still want to know which character in this is the John Connor, which character in this is the Sarah Connor. I went in thinking it was Ica. And now when we get to the end, I'm thinking it's Kenta. I'm thinking Kenta
Yeah,
is the leader
yeah,
of the resistance, especially if he's got some command over the Terminators in the future. So I
yeah.
absolutely think there's some continuation that could happen. Um, I want to know what's going to happen with his siblings because the Terminator tells him you have no future with your brother and sister. So what's going to happen with Riker and Hero? Um,
Mm,
and I'm glad that Netflix is getting more into animes because Castlevania was very good, because Blood of Zeus
mm.
was very good. Um, Seven Deadly Sins wasn't necessarily theirs, but they still carried the dubbed
Oh,
version.
okay.
So I'm glad that Netflix is kind of getting more into this, and I hope this is a continuation because we've kind of seen lapses with Blood of Zeus and Castlevania. So I hope that this is kind of their way to keep the ball rolling in a more consistent fashion.
Yeah, and hopefully it's not in like 3 years from now we see a season
No,
two, because we did have to wait, I think, over 3 years for Blood of Zeus season two. So
yeah, here,
so
who's
yeah,
Kenta?
yeah. So we don't want to be wondering for too long. So um yeah, I mean, obviously they have the whole Kenta thing to work through. As far as Malcolm dying, I'm not sure if Malcolm has a place in the next series unless they do some weird time stuff back backwards and forwards.
I wouldn't want him to do time jumps. I wouldn't mind him doing flashbacks
Yeah, maybe it'll
because,
be like in the form of a flashback, but I
yeah,
wonder, if his story is tied up, or and that means like now his family, Kenta and his other two kids are kind of at the forefront. You know, I don't think they ever mention how old the kids are. Like, do we know if Kenta is 12 or whether he's 16 years old? Like, we have no idea, right?
yeah, yeah. We really only know that he's older than the other two.
Yeah,
And he's
we
a boy genius with the technology stuff, so he can't be too young. So I think somewhere in that wheelhouse. My guess would be like 14, 15.
Yeah, I mean, it's super hard to tell. Like, he could be 10 years old for all I know. I feel like no, I feel like these animes, like, especially I
They're
remember
very bad with that.
With Sailor Moon, like I remember she like, oh, she's like 16 for sure. And like I read that somewhere that she was like 12, and I'm like, what? Or
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
remember. It was some weird age thing. So
Crime
um
fighting 12-year-old in a song.
yeah, so I mean, I have no idea how old Kenta would be if he's going to be the one that kind of saves humanity or anything like that. But so we do have some foreshadowing at the end. You wrote down that quote and I wrote down that quote for sure. So Aiko kind of leans into the frame
Oh
at
yeah.
the end, and she's like, basically like, I don't know what's going to happen, but things will get worse before they get better.
And that makes sense. That makes sense to me the way they ended it with not knowing with not knowing whether it's Skynet that they have to worry about or Kokoro. So that makes sense that there is kind of a agitation, for lack of a better word, of the antagonist to the protagonist because like I we don't we don't know if it's just going to be two two competing evils and they're just gonna bash each other's heads and then humanity is going to be left in the center to try and figure out whatever's left of the puzzle.
Yeah. So I mean, it also, you're also wondering whether there's going to be like, is there just going to be this like huge war or battle between the machines and humanity?
Machine,
Probably at some
yeah,
point.
machines versus humanity, machines versus machines and humanity. It's like Game of Thrones in anime text space.
Choose your fighter. Yeah.
Yeah. Ryu. Sorry.
Yeah. But I mean, like overall, you liked it. I would say I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching.
I enjoyed it. It took me it took a little while for me to get into it, but I did enjoy it, and especially once they started digging into the characters a little bit more, I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it helped that the episodes were short and sweet, and it was like when something kind of happened that was like you were like, oh, I want to see more. The credits rolled, and it was like, do you want to watch another one? And I was like, sure, I'll watch another one.
Well, they're only like 24 minutes. It was very easy.
Yeah. There were max half hour, so that was easy to digest for me, and I generally enjoyed it. So yeah, I hope it gets picked up so that we can cover the second season, and I hope it's not going to be in 3 years from now.
Oh.
Knock on wood, please. So if you enjoy listening to our show, we would appreciate it if you gave us a good 5-star review, and if you left us some love on there if you haven't already. Also, make sure you follow along with us on Instagram and TikTok. He is Nutmeg, the number 2 Palmetto. I am Binge the Ginge with dots between the words for Instagram, all run together for TikTok. So give us both follows on social. Then stay tuned to the show on all of our platforms. We're on video on YouTube and Rumble with our sparkling ginger hair and pale faces. And then you can listen to our sexy voices on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. For episode 2, which is our next episode, we're watching our guy Kevin Costner in Horizon, an American Saga, which is chapter 1 on Max. Since he may or may not be in this last season of Yellowstone, we wanted to see him. He's our dude. So until the next real review, Red and Red signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
No. Try not. Do. Or do not.
Because I don't want no scrubs.
Let the dogs out, like, who let the dogs out? Who?
Who brought this guy along?
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you. Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Blow up! Peace!
Fire, you son of a... You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did it.
Toodaloo, motherfucker.
Hey, It's not funny anymore.
Chelsea references. Still nothing, I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.